Hi everyone, my name's Rebecca, I'm the voice behind Feather Stitch House, and thank you for joining me for this video tutorial today. Now we're going to be making some wearable sunshine, and this is a very simple project, and it could be a first project to do with the children, to get them into sewing, or it might just be an easy, mindful way for you to spend a sunny afternoon making something lovely for yourself. So on the screen you'll see a list of things that you're going to need for this project. First of all, you're going to need some scraps of yellow fabric, and these can be offcuts that you might have otherwise thrown away, so it's a great way to use up those bits and pieces and save them going to waste. The greater the variety of shades and patterns and textures you can find, the better. It will all add to that scrappy effect. You're going to need two 5cm circles of felt, and these are going to be hidden, so any scraps that you have will do. You need a small circle of dark brown fabric, and this will form the centre of the flower. Felt would work as well. You also need some embroidery threads, and you can pick your own, whatever you like, but I'm going to suggest that you use a pale yellow, a gold, a mid-brown and a dark brown. You're going to need a fabric marking pen, and in the video you will see me using a heat erasable pen, and I really like these for working with felt because they give a really sharp, crisp line, and you get rid of the marks with just a tap of a cool iron at the end of your project. You're going to need some sharp scissors. Embroidery scissors are really good because they've got a pointed end. For most of this project, a standard embroidery needle will be fine, but we are also going to use some small seed beads, and you might find that you need a finer needle for that, and I'll talk about that later in the video. Finally, you're going to need a safety pin so that you can wear your sunflower when you've finished your project. So to start, you need to draw your petals on your scraps of yellow fabric. Now I'm just eyeballing it here, but if you download the instructions from our website, there is a template for these. I found that some of these petals were a little bit short in length. I was just using bits of fabric that I had, so the template gives you a lot more space to be able to sew them on. And when you've drawn your petals, you need to cut them out. Don't worry if your fabric frays a little bit, because we're actually going to do that intentionally at the end. So just cut them out as neatly as you can, and you probably need about 16 to 20, just enough so that the felt is completely covered. Now I'm going to mark the petal placement. So to do that, you need to take one of your felt circles and fold it in half, and just along the fold make a couple of marks to show where the halfway point is. Then join up those marks, fold in the felt in the other direction and mark it again, and so you should be marking north, south, east and west, and just join those up with a ruler. If you download our instructions, the pattern has these marked on for you, so you can just mark the dots. And I've also added an extra couple of lines across the diagonals so that you've got placement for 8 petals. It just helps your sunflower look even. So now I'm taking some yellow thread, and I'm just using one strand. This is 6-stranded embroidery thread. I've just pulled out one strand, and I'm just going to place the petals on the lines that I've marked and just secure them in place with a couple of simple running stitches. You want your petals to overhang the felt so that the tips of the petals are free and loose, and it will just give a little bit of movement and stop your sunflower looking too rigid. So I'm going to sew on those north, south, east and west petals, and then when I've done that, I'm going to fill in the gaps with some more petals, so I've got 8 in total. when I've sewed those on, I notice that there's a couple of places where the felt circle is showing through, so I'm just adding a few more petals there until the felt's covered. I'm trying to get a balance of shades and textures, so I'm looking at where the lighter petals are and where the darker petals are, and just trying to get a little bit of balance. The trick is to make it look balanced without it looking too regular. You want it to look a little bit random, so just play around until you're happy with the placement of your petals, and then stitch it down again with a bit of running stitch, and you can use your thumb to hold the petals in place at the centre while you sew around with the other hand. Now you've just seen me there making a quilter's knot. I like to use this kind of knot because they tend to be a little bit bigger, and felt, because it's not woven, sometimes your knots can pull through. So quilter's knots work really well because they're quite chunky and you can do more wraps. I might do a little mini reel on Instagram of how to do a quilter's knot if you need a little bit of help with that. So now I'm doing some running stitch around the petals. Now if you download our instructions from the website, you'll notice that this step is a little bit out of sequence, and I found that if I did the running stitches first before putting the centre of the flower on, I ended up covering up some of the sewing that I'd done. So the instructions are a better way of doing it, I think. You learn by doing, so here's a good example of that. So you've just seen me finish off the thread in a slightly different way. I hadn't got enough thread there to do a quilter's knot, so all I did was just sew through a couple of the stitches on the back and take my needle through the loop that I'd made just to finish it off and tie a knot. Now we're going to add our centre circle, so I've got my small dark brown circle and a single strand of dark brown thread, and I'm going to work my way around the circle with running stitch again. When you've gone full circle, you can add in some more decorative stitches. So I'm carrying on with my single strand, and I'm just going to go around the centre again with some running stitches. So this time I'm just onto the petals. Now I'm going to take 2 strands of dark brown thread, and I'm going to carry on and add some more running stitches. So I'm just building up the layers of stitches, just in different weights of thread. You could use different shades of brown if you want to. It doesn't matter if your lines of stitches overlap or if they're particularly even, it all adds to that sketchy effect. So I'm just going to keep on adding running stitches all the way around, filling in any gaps, just so that that centre of the flower has a sort of fade as it works its way out. Now this is our last little bit of embroidery on the front of the flower. I've got 2 strands of mid-brown thread, and I'm adding some French knots around the centre just to add a bit of texture. And I've zoomed in here so that you can see the process. So take your needle through from the back, wrap the thread around the needle, and then push your needle through at the point your thread came out of the fabric. And I'm going to do it again. So push your needle through, wrap the thread around the needle, I'm doing it twice, and then push your needle back through the same hole, and you can see I'm holding on to the working thread there with my thumb so that it doesn't all pull up to the knot before we're ready. So I just let it go at the last minute, so that I get a neat knot, and I'm just going to keep adding them all the way around the centre, and again add as many as you like until you're happy with the look of your fabric brooch. If you've never done French knots before, they do take a little bit of practice, so you might want to have a bit of a go on a piece of scrap felt or fabric just until you've got used to the method. We're going to add some beads, and just as a little tip, you can see my beads ran away immediately then. Beads love felt, and so if you've got a scrap of felt, it's worth just pouring your beads onto that because they won't roll away. Now I've got a milliner's needle here. Now the thing about a milliner's needle is that the eye of the needle is the same diameter as the shaft of the needle, so they go through beads really nicely. And I've got a single strand of thread because that's all you need, and I'm just adding with a single stitch as many beads as I want to until I think it looks okay. It just adds a little bit of glitter, a little bit of sparkle. Now we're doing the final stages, so you take your safety pin, and I've opened mine just to give myself a little bit of space to work, and I'm going to take a coordinating thread. This is 2 strands of gold just because it matched my felt, and I'm going to work blanket stitch so that it goes over the top of my safety pin. I get into a bit of a tangle here, no one's perfect. So I do have a reel on Instagram that shows you how to do blanket stitch. If you look on my grid, there's a highlight for letter B, and there's a blanket stitch really short tutorial in there if you want a little bit more of an idea how to do it. So the trick here is to keep your stitches really tiny and really close together, so it's almost like a buttonhole stitch. And then when you've worked your way along the length of the pin, just add a couple of stitches through the ring at the end of the pin just to stop the pin moving around. And then all we've got left is to sew the back onto the brooch. So I'm just going to line up the 2 pieces of felt, and again I've got 2 strands of coordinating thread, and I'm going to start by going between the layers of felt, and this is a good way to hide your knot. So if you just go through the top layer first, tuck the end of your thread inside, and then just start working your blanket stitch around the outside of the circle. Now your first blanket stitch is always a bit wobbly, but we're going to fix it at the end, so don't worry. Just work your way around. You can see I'm using my finger there to keep the thread and the petals out of the way and stop me getting into a tangle. So I'm just going to work my way all the way around. And then I'm going to catch my first stitch. The sun came out almost perfectly. Now I'm catching my first stitch. Hope you can see that okay. And when you pull your thread tight, it straightens up that first stitch, so it looks really even and you can't really tell where you began. So I'm sewing through that stitch a couple of times and taking my needle through the loop to create a knot. And then I'm going to feed my needle through the 2 layers of felt, through in between them and take the needle out onto that yellow disc, and if you pull your thread tight and tuck your scissors right down, you can snip it off and the thread disappears back into the felt. So that's it, that's our felt brooch. Thank you so much for watching. The instructions are available on our website and they're free if you subscribe to our newsletter. Have a great day and I'll see you soon. Bye.